Okay, it's looking good. It's actually looking good. Okay, it's looking good. Yeah, I think we're live.
Good stuff.
Right. Okay, let's not waste any time because we all know now that these sessions fly by. And I'm delighted to say that we've had a lot of submissions this time. So we're really keen to get through as many as we can. But also, because of the fact that this is proving to be so popular now, we're actually going to offer an extra way of getting feedback. So I'll talk about that later on. There'll be a nice reveal for everybody. So let me start with the introductions because we might have some new people who aren't usually with us. I can see we've got quite a nice audience. So hello to everybody that's tuning in, and indeed hello in the future to the people that are tuning in retrospectively. I'm Brian Waters, and I run the QTube, which is, as everyone undoubtedly knows, a platform for composers. We provide these clips for composers and sound designers, actually, to use for practice and for developing a portfolio. And one of the great aspects is that you can use these clips as within the community. And I think it's really fascinating in these sessions, not only to get the feedback from our two esteemed guests who will introduce themselves shortly, but also to see what other people are doing with the same materials. I think that's really educational. So without further ado, Brian, do you want to give the usual quick spiel?
Yeah, my name is Brian Morrell. I'm currently deputy head of the School of Music and Education at Leeds Conservatoire. And I teach on the film music degree, which I wrote about 6 or 7 years ago. Yes, that's me.
Lovely, thank you. And Stefan?
Hi, I'm Stefan Gordon. I also work at Leeds Conservatoire. I'm a principal lecturer on the film music pathway. I've worked with Brian for a very long time. I look at filmmaking, directing, screenwriting, cinematography as part of our course to get film composers into the idea of film storytelling as musicians.
Thank you so much. There's some lovely comments in the chat. Keep the chat coming. It's always nice for me to see what you guys are thinking about these sessions. So I think everyone enjoyed the clip that we had this month, but it wasn't without its challenges. And Brian and Stefan and myself have had some really good discussions today, and I'm hoping that we can distill some of that down for you this evening. Some of the challenges associated with horror, associated with this specific clip. Stefan asked me just now, what were my expectations as a director, if you like, of the clip? And so we've had some really, really good discussions, and I hope we can capture some of that. We won't be able to do everything, but perhaps we'll do some of that as we go, chaps, if any of that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a few queued up, yes, for us to listen to and then comment back on. I think the first one was Jameson Toby, was that right?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Shall I fire that up straight away and we'll get into it? Yeah. Just to sort of say, just as before I do this, again, it was great to hear lots of different versions of this clip. I thought the clip itself was really interesting and was really well put together, and it was good to see the lots of different ways that people tackled this. Just also what I think was really useful as a terms of an added addition this time was to get some lines from the composers about what their ideas were and what their vision was for the clip. That really helped, and we can talk about that as we go. So I'll fire up Jameson's clip now.
Excellent.
So bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go. Hopefully you can all see and hear that.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Jack. Did you think you could hide from us? You can't run from what you did,
You can't
Jack.
run from what you did, Jack.
They know.
They know.
They know.
They all know. You can't escape us, Jack.
We remember what you did.
Every single detail.
How could you just leave
just
our
leave
life
our
there
mind
like that? There's no
no
running
running
from
from
your
your
sins,
sins,
Jack. We're proud of you now. Your conscience.
Your punishment with us forever. With us forever. You can never forget. See you soon, Jack.
We'll be
We'll be waiting. Always. You animal.
Excellent. Jameson is with us actually, so that's great.
Good. Should I go first?
Excellent.
Hi Jameson.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Should I go first then, Steph?
Yeah, go for it, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, like Steph was saying at the beginning, this clip wasn't without its challenges, and as Brian was saying as well, one of those challenges is the fact that the clip itself is extremely scary and it's visually quite demanding, and it's got quite a lot of really great, fearful sound design. So sometimes, occasionally, it can be a problem for composers if they approach a clip with exactly the same mindset to basically duplicate what's going on visually, musically. Sometimes if you end up just replicating that fear and horror musically, it can end up not often having a lot of emotional depth. And that's often the case with horror films. They are notoriously difficult to score because the emotional narrative is so specific and so directed, and sometimes the music can get sucked into it. Right. Anyway, so this first one, I thought it was really good, and I liked your little quote at the beginning on the spreadsheet saying I wanted to make it as scary as possible without it being distracting. That's a great observation, because once film music becomes distracting, it basically loses the point of it being there. I thought you started out really well. You had the kind of customary low, kind of like the kind of low E's. I don't know if you can hear that, hopefully.
Yeah,
kind of low E's, really deep down, and that's a terrific way to start it. And I think you use that E notes as a pivot note to grow into certain other chords, like you have the E and then you had other chords growing out of it, which was really good. I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me in general a little bit of John Carpenter's music, which is a compliment, because John Carpenter is a fantastic director but also a fantastic composer, and he did a lot with quite a small amount of gear actually. So you did a lot of musical chords. It reminded me of John Carpenter. The textures worked really well, and there was some great harmony and textural combinations, and that's the crucial thing here. If you could have the best sound in the world, but if you were using it in a harmonically inappropriate way, then it ruins it. This clip, the music and the textures, the harmony and the textures were at one, and that's really good. And I've put, I'm just reading from my notes now. Beware as a general rule that sometimes we need to do more with music than simply replicate, particularly in horror. If we just replicate the scariness, often the two cancel each other out. We just end up with something that can be quite distracting. The images are scary, the sound design is scary, and the voices are scary. So the music can sometimes be good if it's a vehicle for some other kind of subtly different emotional expression. If you think of John Carpenter and you think of films like The Thing, films like Christine, films like Halloween, and you separate the music and play it on its own, granted, it is film music, but it's not actually especially scary. It's just the combination of what he wrote for the music and what he directed on the screen that makes the whole thing scary. And I would use that as a benchmark whenever you're writing music. If you're simply writing something that replicates what's on the screen, it is going to cancel each other out eventually. So I think this music was really good. I think it did become a little bit too sound designy towards the middle and the end. There was quite a lot going on, and it was competing with the sound design actually in the film, and that was a theme that runs right through most of these submissions tonight. But I did think the music was really good, and I think the way you started it off was really effective, and the use of texture was really good. So that's that one.
Fantastic.
Okay. I think I'd add to that. There was a lot that was really good about this. It's interesting going back to what I said earlier. I think having the line from the composer about what their thoughts were was really, really useful. And because on this one, Jameson had wanted to make it as scary as possible without it being distracting. That is key in terms of the key line for them to sort of make themselves aware, to remind themselves not to get in the way. And that's what worked about this, because and I was asking Brian earlier from a filmmaking perspective, because this clip was quite difficult to do, because the cuts are quite fast. There's a lot going on in terms of the sound design, so you had to find a way in to make this work, and because it was sort of driven by the sound design. So, and as Brian mentioned just now, also a lot of the submissions was similar in that they were trying to find space for their work to go in, so they went down that road of also adding to the sound design, so less musical ideas. Whereas, and I felt this one was trying to combine the two, which was really good. And what came across to me was that there was a real vision in place with this, and I thought it was well punctuated as well. So, and there was some nice invention. Feedback guitar, which I'm assuming that's what it was actually, I thought was a really nice touch. And I was like, of course, because I didn't think of it until I saw this clip. I thought, of course, sort of guitar feedback and a horror movie, that would absolutely work, because it gives you that kind of like uncomfortable feeling. And so I thought that was really nice, inspired ideas. I like the way it sort of punctuated sort of rhythmically in places. I would sort of say, again, it maybe was just following the clip, because the clip itself had, that sort of traditional horror movie elements, of course, with the character looking in the mirror, darkly lit, all that stuff. So one of the temptations, which was definitely happening here, was to use things like the sampled choir voices or voices. And I always think, it can be problematic doing that, just because of like getting the right MIDI sample. It did work actually, but just sort of be mindful of that. And also I thought, because the image was quite bold, but yet it was a horror movie image, of course, that I thought maybe some of the production was quite clean on this. So I thought maybe it could have, because they were using Jameson was using guitar feedback, I thought he could maybe have given it a bit more crunch to it as an overall mix. But that's a small point, but really good work, definitely.
A bit more filth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go with the guitar.
Yeah, I mean, one of the points we discussed in our earlier chat really was that this clip has its challenges, and one of them being that it's already almost kind of complete in a way, isn't it? It's scary. You can understand it even with the sound turned off, and then you build in the sound design, and it's more scary if you like. And so it's like, what's the composer's job? And as you said, Brian, if you're just doubling up the scariness, then it almost becomes,
It's funny, because one of the conversations I had many years ago with a composer called James Newton Howard, who'd just done a movie called Signs at the time. I think it was 2002 or something like that, definitely early noughties. And he said that the director tries his best to make a film that doesn't need music. End of story. And then he gives it to James Newton Howard and says, if you think you can make this better, great. And what James often does is not add more horror or suspense or fear, but actually extinguishes some of it. Just lets the air out slightly, to let more emotion in, and that's often the job of a composer, just to slightly bring us down to earth a little bit more and bring more human emotion into it.
Yeah, I mean,
because as well, sorry, Brian, just to sort of jump in slightly as well, because with this clip as well, I thought, I mean, it was a really good clip to do, and it gave the composers some real great material to work with. But it all it was it said horror. There was no
journey.
There's no character necessarily.
Yeah.
You hear someone's name.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for them to go anywhere else apart from go horror. But what is horror?
Scary moments basically throughout from start to finish. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Exactly.
No, absolutely. I mean, we from the point of view of the Q-tube and making these clips, I can certainly see how we could develop a horror clip to make it a little bit more to give a little bit more scope, and part of it is just the length, isn't it, as well? I think.
It's a
when you've got something that's quite short, it inherently means that it's going to be quite difficult for the composers to put space into the music without them basically not doing anything.
It's funny because if I mentioned John Carpenter a few minutes ago. I mean, if you without going off on one about John Carpenter, I mean, if you look at the movie The Thing, the 1982 version that John himself, along with Ennio Morricone, scored, and then you compare it to the 1950s version of The Thing that's got music going ba 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 ba, scary, 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 scary.
Yeah.
And then the 1982 version starts, and it just starts musically with the little low things, and then you just get this. Ordinary, quite dull chord on low strings, but with the scary pictures, it just works beautifully. So it's that thing we're talking about. It's respecting the picture and not trying to compete with it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've spoken about as well between us, I'm not sure whether we did this on the live stream, was that another job of the music in general is it's almost the glue as well, isn't it? That brings the story together. And I think with a clip like this, it's not really asking for any glue, is it? Because it kind of flows, in itself. And so, these clips they can be a little bit different from doing a film, but a good vehicle hopefully for the composers. That's
Definitely.
the intention.
Yeah,
absolutely.
because a lot of the spot points and a lot of the hit points were already hit with sound design.
Yeah.
Almost every scary point had something already acknowledging that. So music was kind of really prevented from doing that. And I think it was the hardest clip you've ever given them, which is why I think, I think that's why sometimes. No, it's okay.
It's proved the most popular one, though, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
I know.
Horror will always be popular. Yeah.
I know. Well, okay, let's move on to, I think Paul Coles is next.
Paul, yeah.
Paul Coles, yeah. Okay, let me...
I'm not sure if he's with us.
Hopefully you can all see that and hear it.
Yeah.
Jack. Did you think you could hide from us? You can't run from what you did,
You can't
Jack.
run from what you did, Jack.
They know.
They know.
They know.
They all know. You can't escape us, Jack.
We remember what you did.
Every single detail.
How could you
How
just
could you just
leave
leave
her
her
lying there
lying there like that?
There's no running from your sins, Jack. We're a part of you now. Your conscience.
Your punishment with us forever. With us forever. You can never forget. See you soon, Jack.
We'll
We'll be waiting. Always. You animal.
going to have nightmares after this evening.
I know, yeah. I thought, again...
he's with us, by the way. He is with us.
Oh, great, okay.
Great,
so
okay.
again, I thought the music was really good. And I thought of all the submissions, this was probably one of the most musical. I mean, Paul says he shows a classic contemporary style with some layers of sound design. Blah blah. I mean, the classic contemporary style absolutely coming across in spade loads. That's really, really good. Some great chords at the start. You had a little bit of a nod towards Psycho, I suspect, with the strings, the kind of stabby strings. You had a lovely bit on trombones, which I haven't got a trombone sound here, but you had a thing where you got an E and a B, and then an E flat. A lovely bit of dissonance there on the on a kind of some kind of brass sound anyway. And I've put here, in general, beware of sound design style music in a film that's already got plenty of it. We talked about this earlier. The film was very heavy sound design, so if you are going to try and bring sound design elements into your music to a film that's already got spade loads of it, it can be a bit difficult. But I thought the musical bits you did were absolutely fantastic. I've put here, just mentioned the choirs. It's always notoriously difficult using MIDI or sampled choirs. You know, the old adage, you know, never work with children and animals. Well, you'll never work with children and animals and sample libraries doing choirs, because it's very difficult to get it right. If you can get the best sample library in the world for choirs, and you'll find that the choir sounds realistic between maybe that note and that note. Maybe there's a 5-note gap where there you're sounding almost realistic, and the rest of it doesn't. So beware when you're using choir samples. Just use them sparingly, maybe in octaves or maybe in unison. And whenever you start to go for full chords, it can get a bit dodgy. But musically, like I said, it's some really interesting stuff from somebody, I think, who understands music in a really good way. So yeah, well done.
So I mean, if somebody does want to get, if they feel that the piece does require a choir, if you like, what would you suggest then? That they get the local cathedral? Or what? No.
What I would suggest, I mean, I used to generate, when I did loads of TV, years ago before sample libraries existed, I used to even manage to create my own sample choirs using old instruments like DX7s and D50s. So it is possible. What you have to do is study choirs and study the recordings of choirs, and then study the use of choirs in films, and also how choirs are embedded into the orchestra. That's the ticket. If you've got that bit right, then you can get away with a sample being a bit dodgy. Okay. It's only if they're isolated or they are really exposed.
Yeah.
Then the midiness is going to unfortunately just say, "Hello, I'm here."
Okay.
So it isn't the case that you have to use real choirs. In fact, I would go as far as to suggest that normally when you try and use real instruments to try and replicate samples, in a lot of cases it doesn't work. In a lot of cases, people over romanticize real instruments and they get really let down when they get a real string section or whatever. So yeah, but I just think just study choirs, listen to choirs, and just learn them, learn how they sound, what kind of chords they play. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, in terms of someone developing a portfolio, do you think that if they included something like that in the portfolio, like we've just heard, do you think that the shortcomings that you've highlighted with the choir, do you think it would go against them, or that people would accept that it's simply a limitation of sample library? What do you think?
I think, generally speaking, when you're sending stuff off a portfolio off to a director, I mean, normally you'd be sending them off either to a director or to a composer that you want to work with as an assistant. And in both cases, they would give you the benefit of the doubt. They wouldn't write it off just because of a few dodgy samples. It's more if you've used the choir, in this case the choir, if you've used the choir inappropriately. That's the biggest sin, which this hasn't. But it's some people I know have they put all 5 fingers down on the keyboard and they get a choir sound, and they've never heard a choir. So they don't know what one's supposed to sound like. So just beware. Never use a sample of an instrument where you haven't heard the real version of that in an orchestra.
Okay.
Because then if you heard the real version in orchestra, you'll understand what reverb it needs, and what kind of other treatment you need to give it to make it sound like it's actually real.
There's some really interesting comments in the chat today, and somebody mentioned that, and I really agree with this, that hearing this type of thing live is just phenomenal. To hear a good choir, I mean, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? It's just amazing.
Oh, God,
What? Sorry, if you mean a real one, or
to hear it live.
Oh yeah. When you hear it live, I mean, they are notoriously hard to sample. You wouldn't think they would be, because strings are the next type of instrument in terms of resembling the human voice, and they are easy to sample, whereas choirs are just so difficult. And if you examine what a choir does, that's the ticket to examine what a choir does. Often people think that choirs are singing more notes than they are. So people tend to sometimes overdo it.
Do you think it's because every single person in the choir has got a completely different voice, whereas a string section, all the violins effectively sound like violins? Do you think it's something like that?
I don't think so, really, because you could use the same argument about the choir. When you play a sampled choir, then you're triggering maybe 8 voices or 16 voices, and there is a sameness to it. It's just that they haven't quite perfected the choir as well as they have other instruments in terms of sample libraries.
Okay, all right. Stefan, over to you.
Well, it's funny because I've mentioned about choirs as well in the last clip, so it's sort of taken me back to this thing about horror movies using certain tricks every time. But just before I get onto that, I thought this was really good, actually, and Brian's covered most of it, but I thought Paul really did want to. Well, it felt like he wanted to challenge himself in terms of doing different, not just the horror movie stuff, but applying sort of more sort of orchestral instruments, which I thought was really effective, actually. And I really liked the opening part. For me, it had this kind of like calmness to it, like the opening pads, synth pads. Then I thought it was really, really effective, and generally the production sounds on this was really good. Going back to the horror thing, there's some chimes in there, I think, as well, and I thought, horror always brings up either this kind of like chimes or music boxes or choir voices, these kind of little tricks, but the imagery was giving that effect as well. But as Brian mentioned, there was that sort of nod to Bernard Herrmann in there, which I thought was really effective, actually. Just going on, connecting up with MIDI samples, I did notice once the strings came in, I thought that probably some of the MIDI samples were a little bit exposed on the strings as well. I think it was things just like the velocity of them, so they were cutting off a little bit. I think if you apply more reverb to it, that would probably sort it out. But I thought it was a really, really strong piece and it just didn't stick to the one thing. I thought I could see that Paul was trying to mix up different elements to it. I thought by the end maybe there was a bit too many, but that was just me. But I thought it was a really inventive piece, actually, and so definitely well done on that. Just going back to the horror thing, we were talking earlier about this kind of like, what is a horror movie these days, and the fact that we're talking about genre, and genre goes back to the film industry from a long, long time ago, when there was production lines and they would churn out so many westerns and so many different, gangster movies, and they were sort of training audiences to sort of say, well, this is what you're going to get, and so then audiences were like, yeah, absolutely, then they want this kind of thing, and it's lasted, so it's an industry, it's an industry tactic, and here we are. Still sort of looking at genre. And it's interesting because if you take something like a film like Midsummer, which isn't that long ago, that sort of was it's clearly a horror movie, but trying to break convention by shooting it during the day rather than nighttime, shooting at wide shots rather than close-ups. So I was thinking, where are we going to sort of go with genre? And I think it's going to be kind of interesting what people sort of say, oh, that's a horror movie music soundtrack, do you know what I mean? So I think this is quite an interesting discussion about how genre works when it comes to all elements of filmmaking.
And also when you look at some of the great horror horror film soundtracks, the music is separate. If you separate the music and you don't know it's from the film, you would never guess it was horror music.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, I use maybe a film like The Sixth Sense, which I know isn't strictly speaking horror, probably, but it's definitely a scary film. Whereas most of that music is just like piano music with an orchestra.
Yeah.
But it absolutely does make it more fearful. But it does so because there's a film already there waiting. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's fantastic. I mean, I'm realising that, you know, another benefit of what we're doing with a different clip each month is it really gives us an ability to examine each type of genre, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite nice,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, should we move on to Emerson?
Emerson, yeah.
Emerson, yeah, right. Okay.
Emerson Newcastle.
Yeah.
Emerson Newcastle, yeah.
I love this name.
Let's fly this.
Yeah, great name, yeah.
Hi, Emerson. I believe he's with us.
Brilliant.
Brilliant, right. Okay, let's, here we go. If we can see it here.
Did you think you could hide from us? You can't run from what you did,
You can't
Jack.
run from what you did, Jack.
They know.
They know. They know. They all know.
Jack.
You can't escape us, Jack.
We remember what you did. Every single detail. How could you just leave her lying there like that? There's no running from your sins, Jack. We're a part of you now. Your conscience.
Your punishment. With us. Forever.
Forever.
With us. Forever. You can never forget. See you soon, Jack.
We'll be waiting.
We'll be waiting. Always. You animal.
Okay.
Wow, nice. Wow, I love that touch at the end.
Oh yeah, that thing at the end is a real stroke of imagination. That really is. That's really well done. It's a shame in a way that it had to fade, that it couldn't just have a natural end actually. But you know, it's a great idea that you can use somewhere else. I thought, and again, reading what you wanted to do here goes to create a dark side of the human being and create an obscure atmosphere. And I think you definitely did that. I think the music. I think later on it became a little bit too full on in the way we described other clips, other scores, where the music has just been too fearful along with the film, and it just ends up being a little bit distracting. But certainly for the most part, this was a really well delivered piece of music, very atmospheric. I love that kind of that idea you've got of you've got the very creepy. And you don't have to do loads to create that. I mean, you could harmonize them, I guess you could, later on you could harmonize whatever, but that initial line, very Bernard Herrmann and very kind of unisons and stuff, very good on basses and cellos. I thought around the 1 minute mark it did become a little bit too busy, and I think a lot of people that have scored this have become a little bit seduced by the horror narrative and by the sound design and by wanting to create this world of terror. And often, like I keep saying, sometimes the music doesn't have to match the film, and if it does, it can be problematic. And finally, the end on the piano was just inspired, just really good. I mean, almost everything you do in horror movies is going to end up being cliched, and the use of the piano is a cliche, but the way you've done it is definitely not a cliche. The way you've done it is beautiful. And I think if you have another pop at this at any point, or you're doing another film that was a horror and you use the same idea, would be to do it and complete it, not let it fade out, just complete it on a note at the end with stacks of reverb. But gorgeous piano stuff. So yeah, good, excellent.
Makes me want to make a horror film now.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I also really liked this. I wrote down that I thought it was really well executed, actually, because I thought there was some, someone who had a real sort of strong vision for this. I thought there was, and as you say, Brian, I think with the piano at the end, but there was the pause before it, and I was like, that's it. It's great, because I thought having that pause was great, and I thought they're just going to get the credits with nothing, which would have been good. But then the piano comes in. I was like, oh wow, actually, that was quite inspired. I also, like Brian said earlier, it got a little bit busy in places, because I noticed with the percussive element, which I thought was really good, but then there was some added sort of textures on there on top of that as well, and I thought maybe it was just one too many ideas possibly for me there. But and there was also, I think there was a quick burst of a choir voice in there somewhere, actually, that I noticed. I thought, we're sort of back to the choir thing again. But I thought this, and I put, at the end here, I put this as a real strong vision in place with this. So I thought it was a really, really good job. I liked right from the start, actually. It felt like, as a composer, they were definitely in control of this. Because sometimes you can get that feeling right from as soon as a composer starts adding stuff that they know what they're doing, and they were in control, and that's what I totally got from this. I thought it was yes, they were using the kind of horror for obvious reasons, as we've already talked about, but they didn't go down too far down the track, which I thought was good. So they left space for the film as well. So it was very well punctuated. So great work.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke as well earlier. It just comes to mind what we said about the fact that, often the fact that tropes are recycled so many times is down to money, isn't it? And the sort of fear of taking a risk with the big studios. And so, as a composer, if you're really looking to kind of break out of the mold, you're going to have to also be lucky to get a director and producers that are willing to take a risk on something that's subverting basically the conventions as well.
And I think, to be honest, that if you do get a director like that, the way that you'll win them over is to explain what it is you're hoping to achieve. If you just go, right, there's a lot of weird music here, what do you think? That's not going to work. But if you justify what you're doing and you say, this really plays to that character's subconscious or whatever, then that's the way in with the director. Just in all examples where when Jerry Goldsmith spoke to the director of Planet of the Apes and said, look, I'm going to do a serial music score, which on its own musically is just a real tough listen. The director must have thought he'd gone mad or something, but Jerry absolutely managed to convince him. And I was lucky enough many years ago before he died to talk to Jerry Goldsmith, and he said you would never get away with that now. He said you would never get away with a score like that for a film like that. And he was right, because then Planet of the Apes was redone and Danny Elfman did a great job, but it wasn't a serial score, it was a normal Hollywood score. So if you're going to do what you said, Brian, if you're going to convince the director to let you go off the deep end, you've got to conceptualize them to death and justify what you're doing, and just say, just give this a chance. Just, don't go Hollywood on this. Just, yeah.
And I mean, that column that we've added to the feedback submission thing is an opportunity to practice doing that almost, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Explain to us why you've approached this in a completely unexpected, atypical way. And
the thing is, it's always, sorry, Steph, I was going to say, it's always difficult getting composers to conceptualize, believe it or not. One of the hardest jobs that me and Steph have at our place is trying to get composers to watch a film and to sit and watch it, make notes before they get anywhere near a keyboard. Look at it, conceptualize, think, okay, is this going to be romantic harmony? Is it going to be jazz? Is it going to be electronic? What's it going to be? Is it going to be difficult textures? Is it going to be nice textures? Think about all these things before you even write a note. And then when you come to writing the music, you'll find it's actually quite easy. Because if you conceptualize to that high degree, essentially you're creating your own path. Whereas what a lot of composers do is they just put a film on, they go straight to the keyboard, and they just start playing. And like you said earlier, Brian, that's akin to an author just saying, I want to write a book, and just going, once upon a time, without any idea of what they were going to do. And you've got to have that conceptualization. It's absolutely key. And it's the hardest thing to get composers to do, because they want to write music.
Yeah.
If you tell them to not write music,
because that was what I was really looking at. Going back to the spreadsheet, I looked at the comments, because there were so many submissions this time. I looked at and thought, I wanted to pick out straight away, as reading through them, the ones that had conceptualized. Emerson's point was, my goal was to bring the dark side of the human being. I immediately thought, that sounds interesting, and that fed into the music. It totally fed into the music. If you think about what Emerson did with some of these ideas at the very beginning of the clip, and the use of the end piano, because if a composer sort of goes, right, I'm going to use a piano on this, you might go, oh, actually, maybe that's the wrong way to take it. But because it's been conceptualized, it's totally made it work.
And also, if that was a class and a composer said, I'm gonna go dark on this, the first thing I would say is, what's dark music? What is dark music? Because there's a tendency to think that dark music always means low brass or low French horns or low strings, and it doesn't. It can mean a nice piano. That piano at the end is incredibly dark, but musically on its own, it's quite bright.
Or even the feedback guitar like we had on the other one, something like
that. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, speaking of the way that people express their concepts, I think the next one is a really good example.
Oh, it's a massive one. This one,
This is
this person, and I'm not sure whether it's he or she, but this person really put some thought. You could see that some real thought had gone into the piece.
Definitely.
Maybe we'll even read out some of that.
Yeah.
But let's listen to the piece.
Yeah, in fact, let me share. Can you all see that? So what I liked about this was it was also in the bit here, and it gave us a real insight into what the composer was trying to achieve with this. And it was a really, obviously we don't want people to sort of spend ages writing an essay or anything, but this was great. And even talking about the sound design, doing lots of rectifying distortion to simulate the fracturing of Jack's psyche, and I said to you earlier, Brian, about who is Jack. And this composer has thrown in some characterization, which is great, and I was massively drawn to this because of this approach. Should we have a listen?
Very cool. Yeah, brilliant. Ryna Lau, I believe.
Yeah.
Jack.
Jack. Did you think you could hide from us? You can't run from what you did,
You can't
Jack.
run from what you did, Jack.
They know.
They know.
They know.
They all know. You can't escape us, Jack.
We remember what you did.
Every
Single detail. How could you just leave her
lying there like that?
There's no running from your sins, Jack. We're a part of you now. Your conscience.
Your punishment. With us. Forever. With us. Forever. You can never forget. See, Jack. We'll be waiting. Always. You animal.
great. Again, should I start, Brian? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, to be honest with you, I mean, there's lots to say about this. The ending thing, which I hadn't clocked the first time round. I just heard the ending where the composer goes like, down to the F minor at the end. Absolutely spellbinding ending. I mean, really, really top class. So I'll let Steph, when he does his thing, talk through the actual, the whole conceptualization thing, because there's lots of it. But I just thought the level of conceptualization here, the level of detail this person has gone into to try and get themselves in the mood for writing the right kind of music is just stunning. There's one bit in particular where he says, I detuned everything by 40 to 50%. To make it sound more uncanny and disturbing and impure. That is class, because it's the kind of thing that no ordinary film goer would ever realize. Well, they would never think they would realize, but they would be affected by that. If you detune anything, you're basically, people have got a very good understanding of harmony and pitch, even though they don't know what the names are called. They understand what they're listening to, and if you take it down by half, by a quarter tone or an eighth of a tone, you are absolutely messing with people's feelings of what they're going to get musically. So that's a massive great thing to do. One thing which I thought was kind of worked less well, you said, I wanted the narrator's voice to get drowned out in the middle by a sea of sound, almost as if you're in his head. Now, I understand the concept of that, absolutely. But I think the reality, the harsh reality of scoring a film where there is somebody talking or narrating and then you musically drowning it out, whatever the narrative or conceptualization reason for it is, it's never a good idea. Because, because if you do that, people can't hear what the narrator's saying, they get confused, it can get really messy. I totally get the logic of why you wanted to do that. But generally, as a rule of thumb, you would never drown out, talking or dialogue, or especially off-screen narration like that. But apart from that, this was a really good effort and fair play. Yeah.
Similar. What I was really drawn to was as I said, is the kind of additional elements of what their vision was. I thought it was brilliant, and there's two sides to exactly what Brian just said. Is that I think the director would have gone probably up the wall if he's gone to them and said, "I'm going to drown out the voiceover. Hope you don't mind." And it'd be like, "What on earth?"
Yeah.
So first of all, definitely a no-no. But having said that, on the other side of the argument, what this said to me was that this was somebody who was thinking in filmmaking terms. They took this by the scruff of the neck and said, I'm the filmmaker. This is in my hands now. I'm going to drown the voice out. They're the director, which I thought was quite inspired, actually. So, quite a brave move. But yeah, definitely be careful of that, because you certainly don't want to get fired from a job when for upsetting a director. But I thought that was really, really good to have a go at that, and that's the point of doing these clips, isn't it? Anyway, is that it's for them to experiment, and that's exactly what we wanted. Yeah, and that's what they've done. So I love this, and what I also loved about it was this, because it's a short piece, as we've talked. The film, it's quite abstract, so you don't know who Jack is. Well, this composer has given Jack some character, and that's what's great. And I started to thinking about Jack Torrance from The Shining, when the way that they've described it, about this character living inside their own head, all that stuff. I thought really, really inspired, and to take that and take the narrative of a very short clip that is quite abstract and turn it into something, and then that was all then embedded into the musical ideas. I thought they kept it really simple. That's the other thing musically, and I thought there was so much space, so the structure of it was really nicely handled, so it sort of moves upwards. and you left a lot of space, and then the ending section. The only thing I'd say about the end was, well, a couple of things. First, because there's no other, it's just credits with a little bit of sound design, is that the music was a bit more exposed, so I think production needed a little bit more. Sometimes the samples were a bit exposed because there's nothing else there. Also, I wondered, actually, because what it would have been like just to have that first kind of chord over the end credits and then nothing else. So you're left just thinking, just to think, well, what have I watched? So it's what you don't score as well as what you do score. I just, as an alternative idea, I thought, I wonder if you just punctuated it earlier and just brought it to an end and then left the credits to run.
I think you're definitely right regarding that end thing, Steph, that the production-wise it was a bit exposed. And if the composer was here and we could talk to them, then what I'd say is, when you got that F minor and the G flat and the F minor, what I would do is I would reverb into each chord. I would just have a level of reverb where the chords gloss into each other and they morph into each other, and they don't just go bang, bang, bang. And I think that way
it felt a bit dry, didn't it?
Yeah, I think if you had the chords kind of morphing into each other, that's terrifying to start with. So, that'd be a great way to end it. But yeah,
but really, really inspired.
Absolutely,
and, well done.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. God, look at the time. Right, so we've done 4, but we've given a hell of a lot of general insight as well into horror as a genre. I think there's a few honourable mentions, so we'll do those. And then I want to say that everybody else that submitted, not only this month, but from now on, we will be giving written feedback to make sure that everybody gets some kind of feedback. So those that get featured are featured, so they've got their feedback. And then those that are not featured but managed to submit in time, we will get back to you with some written feedback. So we want to make these sessions as valuable as we can. So, please.
So I was going to say, Steph, with these honourable mentions, to save on time, do you want me to do one and then you do the other? If I did Isabel, and then you did Michael or whatever, is that all right with you though? Yeah.
No problems. Yeah.
With Isabel Varley, I just thought this was a good one as well. I aim to create suspense and build up tension with eerie sounds, drones, and impacts. I also aim to create certain Foley sounds, such as the door creak, along with recording my own screams. Brilliant. To further enhance the horror. Now, again, it was a special effects driven kind of musical approach. It did remind me a lot, actually, of the actual music to the Hannibal TV series, which is of a similar vein. It's often difficult to spot whether you're listening to music or sound design. I think that's the idea. You're meant to bridge that gap, and I think you've done that in a really good way. The only thing is, like I said before, is that the clip itself is quite frightening, and it's laden with its own sound design. So, as a composer, if you were doing this gig for real, they will probably get you to steer away from doing door creaks and your own screams. Your own screams is a separate thing because that could be seen as music, but certainly the door creaks and Foley, I would steer away from that and try and keep it musical. That's all I'd say for that one. Yeah, but very good, but very good, and did remind me of Hannibal TV series a lot. Yeah.
So Michael Butcher, as an honourable mention, I really like this. I thought it kept the idea really simple, is what I wrote down, and as described in your intention in the bit that you wrote, it was mostly atonal and percussive. The end result was quite successful and generally sinister. I noted that perhaps the percussive element was a little too much. Sometimes with film scores, I've been saying a lot, is less is more, and that was definitely could maybe eased off a little bit, but really good piece. And I thought it was, again, well executed.
Great. If I just quickly do Martin, is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Course, I don't know this person's surname or whether that is the surname, but. Again, I mean, I think they've put the intention is the feeling of shock and claustrophobia. And that's good. The fact that you're using words like claustrophobia, that's a very specific emotional state, and that requires a very specific musical version of that. And if you do this kind of thing and you conceptualize like this, then you will eventually find the right sound. I thought the bare chords, I mean, obviously, the bare chords, and also this really nice 80s synth sound. I don't know what you were using, but had a really, really almost, kind of 80s, 90s feel to it. And again, a little bit John Carpenter. I thought the rhythm bits, the only thing about this, there was a bit where the rhythm came in, and I thought that was quite distracting, because it makes you straight away focus on the rhythm and the beat and the percussion. It's not always a great idea to use the rhythm on those things, but apart from that, really good.
Martin is with us, and Isabel,
great, excellent.
Isabel thanks you as well for your feedback.
Great.
And indeed, not only Isabel, I think Emerson and others all thanked you for the feedback. So yeah, excellent. Keep going. But Barry,
I've got Barry Thompson. I thought it was quite inventive piece. It appeared to be referencing some past classics, actually, I noted down, but also adding in some of his own voice as well, which was good. I did note down that if you are referencing, there had a bit of the psycho thing going on. Sometimes it has its drawbacks. People just going, oh yeah, we're going back to the whole thing about horror movies and all that kind of stuff. So it does have its drawbacks, and also I think if you start to look at either Bernard Herrmann or maybe even what John Williams was doing with Jaws, that you know people are going to go, oh well, it's like that, but you can tell it's samples. You know what I mean? You sometimes put yourself in a difficult position with that. But having said that, there was also some nice synth stuff in this, and I thought. Barry's point was, it said keep the composition minimal and relevant and add a little more sound design. So people have gone for this thing of trying to keep it really tied to the sound design, and I thought Barry did a good job on that. So well done.
I mean, I would say as a general rule to everybody, if you ever come across anything like this again, there's a movie called Seven. It came out quite a few years ago now, with I can't remember who's in it now, but the composer was Howard Shore, and he wrote a great soundtrack, and people assume that it's a very sound designy soundtrack, and it's actually not. It's actually quite a musical thing, but it's very dissonant. But when they mixed it, when they put it to the screen and they mixed it, the music is so low in the mix that in actual fact, when you hear it, you actually do think it's just the sound design itself. But that's a decision by the director to do that. But if you listen to the soundtrack album of Seven and you listen to what Howard Shore did, that's like an exemplar in kind of how to do horror, how to do deep horror and trepidation and fear in music by simply using ordinary harmonies. Okay, brilliant. He does this thing which we call the 7 chord. It's not a 7 chord because it's a seventh. It's basically the 7 chord because it's just a chord, but he uses this thing with a G minor chord, but he then puts a 4th in there, so he goes, and it's on trombones and tuba, and all he's done there is use a normal chord and just take the 5th out and put the 4th in. But because it's on trombones and tuba and it just keeps playing again and again and again and again, it just becomes horrifying and stuff like that. So it's a good example to listen to for how to mix music with sound design. That's what I'm saying, really.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, the comments are making me smile. Right, one more. Yeah, honourable mention, Kristen, I believe. Yeah.
Yep, I've got. I've only got a little bit for this, Christian. Sorry. So Steph, because we're short on time, do you want to go with that one?
I wrote down, I very much like this piece, very creative.
Kristen Tilbury,
yeah.
That's it. But the use of the synth pads was really, really good, as was the kind of rhythmic filters that were added to a lot of that. Also, there was quite a lot of voice manipulation on this, which I thought was quite inspired, actually, in terms of the production. Maybe again it was bit much in terms of by going down the production routes, perhaps, took away from some of the other elements. But, I thought, there was some very nice production elements. What else did I write down? I felt that they could have done a little bit more with the pads and the percussive element to take this even further, but I thought generally it was quite an inspired piece, and I liked what she wrote down about it being, since the video is nothing like a campy Halloween trailer, I wanted to create a very dark, grim atmosphere to match the sequence.
Yeah.
The vocals become less intelligible and more distorted to illustrate the protagonist's mental deterioration. So what I liked about this was that they were giving it some characterization, like we mentioned before. So I definitely think it's worth, for going forward, when composers are submitting, is what they're writing down about their concepts is really key. And I think this is another really good one in terms of that. So well done to Kristen.
Excellent. As though the Q-Tube could ever do anything campy, for goodness sake.
Perish the thought.
Right. That feels like a challenge. It feels like a gauntlet has been thrown down now, and we have to do something campy.
I think,
all right, so those are the features, those are the honourable mentions. Everybody else will get some written feedback soon. We're not going to promise when, because everybody's very busy, but we'll definitely get that back to you as soon as we can. And so there's a couple more things I want to do quickly, and then we can all go and have a pint or whatever we're going to do. So let's do our prize giveaway from Fracture Sounds. So we're really delighted that Fracture Sounds, who are a small sample library company based here in the UK, not far from Brian in Leeds, and they are helping support this by giving us a library every month to give away, and the winner can kind of more or less choose which of the libraries from the products from Fracture they would like to receive. So yeah, let's spin that wheel. Just bear with me a second. There it is. All right, there are all the names. As you can see, we've got a lot more this month. Good luck, everybody. The tension is palpable out there. Stephen Toby. There we are. Stephen Toby has... I'll be in touch, Stephen, and we'll sort that out for you. And let us know how you get on with the library that you choose. It's always nice to hear back. It needs some music, that's right. If anyone knew some composers, eh?
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry.
I'm definitely not going to sleep well tonight.
No.
And so the next clip, just the next clip for this month, basically, for November. So we'll be giving another feedback session like this in about a month's time. We haven't discussed the date yet, but it'll be either at the very end of this month or very early in December. And it's a really different clip this time. I'm not sure, Brian and Stefan, whether I've shown you this yet, but it's a PSA, it's a public service announcement type clip. So it's something very different, but I think it's definitely worth looking at. There are good opportunities out there for composers. It doesn't really fall under film scoring, but it's here we go. Just play it. You won't be able to hear it, Brian and Stefan, I don't think.
America, the future is in your hands. The upcoming election isn't just another vote. It's your chance to shape the country you live in. Healthcare, education, the economy, the environment, these issues affect you and those you love. No matter where you're from, what you believe, or what your story is.
Either that or he's deeply conceptualizing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. We thought we didn't realise you were playing a film because we can't hear it, so we just thought we'd lost you for a second. You were just staring into space.
Yeah, you look like you're frozen.
Yeah. Yeah, just a bit. Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, thanks, and thanks to the composers for
Absolutely.
submitting.
Yeah. Yep.